Have you ever had someone just vanish from your life? One day they're texting you constantly, calling you, making plans with you, and the next day it's complete silence, no explanation, no closure, just gone. And the worst part? You're left wondering what you did wrong, replaying every conversation in your head, searching for the moment everything changed. But here's what psychology reveals about this phenomenon that most people never understand. The real reason someone disappeared has almost nothing to do with you, and everything to do with what was happening inside their own mind. What I'm about to share will completely change how you see ghosting, sudden distance, and unexplained endings. Let's start with something most people don't know. When someone suddenly pulls away from a relationship or connection that seemed meaningful, they're usually not running from you, they're running from themselves. Psychology calls this emotional avoidance, and it's one of the most misunderstood patterns in human behavior. See, when a connection gets too real, too deep, or too vulnerable, it triggers something in certain people. Their brain starts sending them warning signals, not because you're dangerous, but because intimacy itself feels dangerous to them. This usually stems from past experiences they haven't processed. Maybe they were hurt before. Maybe they saw relationships fall apart growing up. Maybe they learned that opening up leads to pain. So their subconscious mind developed a protection mechanism, and that mechanism tells them to run before things get too serious. Here's where it gets interesting. When someone suddenly disappears without explanation, they're often experiencing what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. This means they have two conflicting feelings happening at the same time. Part of them genuinely cares about you and values the connection, but another part of them is terrified of what that connection represents. The problem is, most people can't sit with conflicting emotions. It makes them deeply uncomfortable. So instead of communicating about it, instead of being honest about their internal struggle, they choose the path that immediately reduces their anxiety. And that path is distance. Complete, sudden, unexplained distance. Because explaining would mean facing those uncomfortable feelings. It would mean being vulnerable about their fears. And that's exactly what they're trying to avoid. Psychology says that people who suddenly withdraw from meaningful connections often have an avoidant attachment style. This doesn't mean they don't feel things deeply. In fact, they usually feel things too deeply, which is precisely the problem. When emotions start to overwhelm them, when a connection starts to matter too much, their nervous system goes into threat mode. Their brain literally perceives emotional closeness the same way it would perceive physical danger. This triggers their fight or flight response, and in relationships, flight looks like ghosting. It looks like suddenly becoming distant. It looks like disappearing without a word. And the person doing this often convinces themselves they're protecting both of you from inevitable pain. Most people don't realize this, but the silent treatment and sudden disappearance often happen right after moments of deep connection. Think about it. Someone opens up to you more than usual, you have an incredibly meaningful conversation, you feel closer than ever before, and then suddenly they pull back. This isn't a coincidence. Psychologically, this is called the vulnerability hangover. After someone reveals more of themselves than they're comfortable with, after they let their guard down, they wake up the next day feeling exposed. That exposure feels unsafe to them, so they immediately try to re-establish emotional distance to regain their sense of control and safety. They might not even be consciously aware they're doing this. It's an automatic protective response that their brain learned years ago.
Here's a psychological truth that changes everything. When someone walks away from you without explanation, they're usually not rejecting you as a person. They're rejecting the version of themselves that would have to show up in that relationship. Because real connection requires honesty. It requires facing your fears. It requires growth. It requires being seen fully, not just the polished version you show the world. And for someone who hasn't done their inner work, who hasn't healed their wounds, who hasn't learned to sit with uncomfortable emotions, that level of authenticity feels impossible. So they choose people and situations that let them stay comfortable. They choose connections that don't challenge them. And when they meet someone who does challenge them to grow, someone who makes them feel too much, they disappear. Your brain does something fascinating when someone leaves without closure. It creates stories to fill in the gaps. You might tell yourself you weren't good enough. You might replay conversations looking for your mistakes. You might convince yourself that if you had just said or done something differently, they would have stayed. But psychology reveals that this is your brain trying to make sense of something that doesn't make logical sense. Because the truth is, their leaving wasn't about your worth. It was about their capacity. It was about their readiness. It was about battles they're fighting internally that have nothing to do with you. And one of the most painful but liberating truths you can accept is this: you can be an incredible person and still be too much for someone who's not ready to face themselves. Let me share something about the psychology of unfinished endings. When there's no closure, no explanation, no final conversation, your brain stays in a state of uncertainty. And humans hate uncertainty more than almost anything else. We'd rather have a painful truth than no truth at all. This is why ghosting hurts so deeply. It's not just about losing the person, it's about losing the narrative. It's about having questions that will never be answered. Psychology shows that unresolved situations take up more mental space than resolved ones. This is called the Zeigarnik effect. Your mind keeps circling back to incomplete situations because it's desperately trying to find resolution. And the person who left, they don't experience this the same way, because in their mind, leaving was the resolution, avoiding the discomfort was the answer. So while you're searching for closure, they've already emotionally moved on by choosing not to deal with it at all. Here's what most people miss about sudden distance. It's rarely about something you did or didn't do. It's about what the connection was triggering in them. Maybe you reminded them of someone who hurt them. Maybe your consistency scared someone who's used to chaos. Maybe your emotional availability intimidated someone who's learned to hide their feelings. Maybe your growth highlighted their stagnation. Psychologically, people often distance themselves from mirrors, and if you were reflecting back something they weren't ready to see about themselves, their instinct would be to remove the mirror, not change what it's showing them. This is why you can be perfect for someone and still be rejected, because sometimes people aren't rejecting you, they're rejecting the person they'd have to become to be with you. Psychology says there's often a pattern with people who disappear. They come back, not always, but often. Sometimes it's weeks later, sometimes it's months, sometimes it's years, and they come back for a specific reason. They come back because whatever distraction they ran to didn't fill the void. They come back because time gave them perspective. They come back because they finally started doing their inner work. Or sometimes they come back because they're still avoiding themselves and they remember you as a comfortable place to hide. This is why it's crucial to understand that someone returning doesn't automatically mean they've changed. You have to look at their actions, not just their words. You have to see if they've actually grown or if they're just repeating the same cycle with better vocabulary. Because people who haven't healed will keep creating the same patterns with different people. Most people don't realize that when someone leaves your life suddenly, they're actually giving you information. They're showing you that they're not capable of healthy communication when things get difficult. They're showing you that they choose avoidance over honesty. They're showing you that their comfort matters more to them than your confusion. And while this hurts, it's also a gift. Because imagine if they had stayed and you built a life with someone who runs when things get real. Imagine investing years into someone who shuts down instead of showing up. Psychology teaches us that people show us who they are through their actions, especially their actions under pressure. And someone who disappears without explanation is showing you exactly how they handle discomfort. They don't face it, they flee from it. Here's a psychological insight about healing from this kind of ending. The closure you're searching for externally, you have to create internally. Because even if that person came back and explained everything, even if they gave you the perfect reason that made complete sense, it wouldn't erase the hurt. It wouldn't change what happened. Real closure comes from accepting that some people are not capable of giving you what you need, not because you don't deserve it, but because they don't have it to give. It comes from understanding that their leaving was about their limitations, not your lack. It comes from choosing to stop waiting for an apology or explanation that may never come, and instead giving yourself permission to move forward anyway. Your brain does something powerful when you stop seeking external validation for your worth. It starts building internal validation instead. Psychology shows that the pain of abandonment often has less to do with losing that specific person and more to do with old wounds being triggered. Maybe this situation reminded you of a parent who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe it echoed a childhood experience of feeling unseen or unimportant. Maybe it confirmed a fear you've carried for years that people always leave. This is why the healing process is so important. Because it's not just about getting over one person. It's about understanding the deeper patterns and finally breaking the cycle that keeps attracting or accepting people who aren't capable of meeting you where you are. Let me tell you something that changes the entire perspective. When someone walks away from you, especially suddenly and without explanation, they're making space. Space for someone who won't run when things get real. Space for someone who communicates instead of disappearing. Space for someone who's done enough inner work to show up consistently. Space for the relationship you actually deserve, not the one you were trying to force with someone who wasn't ready. Psychology reveals that sometimes the universe removes people from your path not as punishment, but as protection. Not because you did something wrong, but because staying connected to someone who can't meet you emotionally would have blocked you from someone who can. Here's the final psychological truth about people who disappear. Their silence is not a reflection of your value. Their absence is not evidence of your inadequacy. Their inability to communicate is not proof that you weren't worth the effort. What it is a clear indication of where they are in their own journey. And one of the most empowering realizations you can have is this: you can be the most amazing, loving, understanding person and still not be chosen by someone who's not ready to choose themselves. Because people can only love you as deeply as they've learned to love themselves. They can only be as honest with you as they are with themselves. They can only show up for you as fully as they've learned to show up for themselves. And if someone leaves your life without explanation, without closure, without care for the confusion they're creating, they're showing you they haven't reached that level yet. And that's okay. But it's also okay for you to stop waiting for them to get there. It's okay to close the door they left open. It's okay to create your own ending to a story they abandoned. Because you deserve people who stay, who communicate, who choose you even when it's uncomfortable. And the moment you truly believe that is the moment you stop being haunted by the people who walked away.